When Machiavelli said a ruler must learn to manipulate both fate and people, he wasn't talking about natural talent. He was talking about a kind of intelligence you forge, bend, and sharpen like a cold blade. This isn't about how much you know. It's about how much you can use to control what others can't. Have you ever wondered why others think faster, speak sharper, or see further than you do, and thought maybe they were just born smarter? Machiavelli would smirk, because that belief is to him the poison of the weak, a soft excuse for intellectual laziness. Here's the truth. Intelligence isn't gifted. It's built through discipline, through detached observation, and through ruthless mental clarity. Look at Epictetus, a man born into slavery who dissected the human condition like a surgeon. Or Marcus Aurelius, an emperor yet humble enough to write nightly reminders to himself just to keep his ego in check. They didn't become wise through destiny. They became dangerous because they knew the mind is a tool, and the one who refuses to sharpen it will be shaped by someone who does. Machiavelli didn't want you to be smart. He wanted you to be in control of whatever intelligence you have, to see clearly what drives you. Reason or illusion. And when you see that, intelligence stops being something to admire and becomes something you command, like a blade steady in your grip, without a hint of hesitation. You think you're getting smarter, but really, you're just getting easier to predict. You scroll through philosophy quotes, you highlight entire books, you nod along to insights and feel clever. But Machiavelli would see something different. Not intellect, but intoxication, the kind of slow, sweet hypnosis that turns potential leaders into predictable puppets. Because here's what most people do. They consume knowledge for comfort. They read to feel smart, not to become dangerous. And that distinction is everything. Machiavelli never praised those who knew the most. He studied those who could apply the least and watched how easily they were ruled. He understood what few dare admit. Learning, when detached from action, becomes self-delusion. You think you're sharpening your mind, but if you never test what you've learned in real conflict, in failure, in confrontation, in silence, you're not thinking, you're rehearsing. Epictetus warned his students, don't just learn philosophy, live it. Marcus Aurelius didn't write to impress the world. He wrote to correct himself. These weren't men of words, they were men of sharpening, carving thought into action day after day until their minds became armor. But today, we confuse highlights with wisdom. We scroll through 10 insights a day and remember none. We chase clarity but avoid friction. And that's the problem. Real thinking requires resistance. Not agreement, not applause, but pause. The kind of pause that happens when someone contradicts you, and instead of reacting, you investigate. That's what Machiavelli admired. Not intellect, but the ability to stay unreadable, to delay response, to weigh outcomes, to ask, what advantage does this thought give me? So when you read, ask this, am I collecting or transforming? Does this idea make me harder to manipulate or just more eloquent when I lose? If knowledge isn't changing how you speak, how you observe, how you choose, then you're not becoming more intelligent, you're becoming more decorative. An encyclopedia no one fears. And that's what Machiavelli warned against. He didn't fear ignorance. He feared educated fools because they talk like thinkers but move like pawns. So stop studying to feel smarter. Start studying to move differently, react differently, decide differently. Only then will the world stop reading you like an open book. Only then will you begin to write your own. Fast minds impress crowds. Cold minds control outcomes. In a world obsessed with speed, quick replies are mistaken for clarity, and clever phrasing is mistaken for intelligence. But Machiavelli knew better. He didn't trust fast thinkers. He trusted the ones who could sit in silence and strategize. Real power doesn't live in how fast you speak. It lives in what you withhold, in what you don't say, in what you see but don't reveal. That's the cold mind. Not passive, not lazy, but disciplined, strategic, predatory. Most people think they're thinking, but they're just replaying old habits, old opinions, old fears dressed up as convictions. They confuse familiarity for wisdom, speed for insight. But true clarity begins where comfort ends. Picture your mind like a battlefield. Every idea that enters is either a weapon or a liability. Every reaction you allow becomes a blueprint for others to use against you. This is why Machiavelli didn't just study rulers, he studied patterns, how people collapse under pressure, how emotions hijack reason, how a single careless word can unravel months of power building. He understood this simple law: the first to react is usually the first to lose. So what's the alternative? Cold strategy. You don't chase certainty, you train for ambiguity. You practice restraint like a soldier sharpens his blade, not out of fear, but preparation. You allow discomfort to linger, questions to breathe, and tension to mature. Because you know clarity isn't found in noise. It emerges when the storm passes and you're still standing. Marcus Aurelius didn't write meditations for peace. He wrote them for war. He trained his thoughts like weapons, measured, sharpened, tested. That's not Stoic serenity. That's Machiavellian conditioning. Because in the end, intelligence isn't how much you know, it's how ruthlessly you control what you think before anyone else does. So next time your heart races to react, your mind flinches to answer, pause. Don't suppress, calculate. Remember, you don't need to be fast, you need to be unreadable. And when the world can't predict your next move, that's when you own the game.
The quietest man always controls the volume. Don't wait for a crisis to wake up. Design tiny revolutions into your daily routine. Most people think breakthroughs come from breakdowns. They wait for heartbreak to set boundaries. They wait for failure to build discipline. They wait for loss to finally get serious. But Machiavelli would scoff. Why wait for the enemy to strike when you could have trained in silence? He believed true power didn't just come from grand strategy, but from micro patterns repeated until they became unconscious weapons. You don't rise in chaos, you rise in routine, in small, almost invisible loops that shape how you think, how you see, how you choose. Consider this: the way you start your morning isn't just habit, it's a signal to your subconscious about what kind of man you are. Do you reach for your phone? You've already lost. You've surrendered attention, your most precious currency, to the world before you even stood up. But what if, instead, you rewrote that loop? What if your first act each day was not consumption, but confrontation? One question, one principle, one cold truth you must answer before anything else. Who holds control of my thoughts today? Me or someone else? This isn't motivational fluff, it's tactical architecture. Because Machiavelli understood power isn't seized in the spotlight, it's built in the shadows quietly, repetitively, intentionally. And that repetition becomes reputation. When others see you eat with discipline, they assume you lead with precision. When others notice you delay gratification, they fear what else you might be delaying. Small actions cast long shadows. That's why your routines are more than habits. They are weapons in disguise. Loaded rituals that tell the world, I do nothing accidentally. So while they scroll for stimulation, you train in stillness. While they binge to escape, you repeat your loop. And over time, this makes you predictable to no one, yet accountable to yourself. Machiavelli wouldn't care about your vision board. He'd care about your system. What loop runs your day? What reaction do you reward? What discomfort do you ritualize? Because intelligence isn't how many insights you collect, it's how many loops you've rewritten. And in a world chasing hacks, the man who masters his repetition becomes the algorithm. The mind doesn't fail from ignorance, it fails when emotion hijacks the controls. Every man has a breaking point, but the intelligent one doesn't wait to reach it. He studies it. He walks toward it on purpose just to see what it looks like before anyone else tries to push him there. Machiavelli never warned rulers about stupidity, he warned them about volatility, because a mind under emotional siege is no longer strategic, it becomes a liability to itself and to the power it holds. Most people never collapse from thinking too hard, they collapse from thinking while emotional. They try to make decisions while hurt, debate while angry, seek approval while insecure, and that's when they lose the game without even knowing they were in one. Emotional clarity isn't a gift, it's a habit, one built through friction, through confrontation, through inner war. That's why the Stoics trained every day for death, not because they wanted to die, but because they wanted to strip fear from the throne. They practiced loss, they rehearsed detachment, because emotion untrained becomes a tyrant. And Machiavelli knew you can't rule the outside world if the inside world is revolting. The man who feels everything is the easiest to trigger. The one who can't sit with uncertainty will always reach for the nearest lie that feels better. The one who panics when he's ignored will trade his dignity just to be seen. But the cold thinker, he knows when emotion rises, the real game begins, because now the average man is exposed, predictable, open for manipulation. Machiavellian intelligence isn't the absence of emotion, it's command over it. It's using emotion as data, not identity. So what do you do when the collapse starts? You pause. You don't react. You observe the breakdown like a scientist, not a victim. You say, this feeling isn't truth, it's just pressure, and pressure is my training ground. Most people collapse because they expect not to. The intelligent expect chaos and prepare for it like a general for war. Because power isn't about avoiding storms, it's about the last man thinking when everyone else is drowning in reaction. So next time the emotions surge, don't flinch, don't speak, just think. That alone already puts you in a class most men never reach. Wisdom without power is decoration, and the world does not bow to decoration. There's a dangerous myth in modern culture that intelligence on its own is enough, that if you just think clearly, speak wisely, and act with logic, the world will naturally reward you. Machiavelli would laugh because he saw the truth. Intelligence that does not lead to power will eventually serve those who do have it. You can be the most rational man in the room, but if no one listens, your clarity becomes noise. You can predict every move, every outcome, but if you have no leverage, you're just an observer, watching lesser minds make bigger plays. Machiavelli's brilliance wasn't in knowing what was right, it was in knowing what was real. And what's real is that the world moves not by insight, but by influence. And influence has laws. Law 1. Perception is stronger than logic. If people see you as uncertain, it doesn't matter how smart you are, they won't follow you. Law 2. Power protects intelligence. Without power, your ideas can be stolen, ignored, or worse, repackaged and used against you. Law 3. Visibility kills strategy. If you show all your thoughts, you become predictable, and predictable minds are easy to neutralize. So what does the intelligent Machiavellian do? He turns his thoughts into weapons. He speaks only when it moves the balance. He builds systems, not slogans. He learns not just to think, but to dominate through that thinking. Because a mind that doesn't lead somewhere, to influence, to negotiation, to psychological edge, becomes ornamental, a sharp blade left hanging on the wall. Marcus Aurelius was a philosopher, but he was also an emperor. He wrote his truths in private, then enforced them in public. Epictetus taught resilience, but he also taught rulers. They understood what Machiavelli made explicit. Wisdom is only useful when it gives you the power to change the game. So ask yourself, are your thoughts making you stronger or just more articulate? Are you using intelligence to shift power or to soothe your ego? Because the world does not reward thought, it rewards results, and the Machiavellian mind knows every thought must lead to advantage. Otherwise, it's a luxury you can't afford. Power dies with the body, but influence, when engineered right, lives far beyond it. Most people die twice, once in body and once when the last person stops remembering them. But the Machiavellian aims to never die at all, not through fame, not through affection, but through architecture, ideas so embedded in the system that his presence is felt long before his name is forgotten. Machiavelli didn't write The Prince to inspire. He wrote it to install a code, to build a virus into the minds of rulers and thinkers, a cold blueprint that teaches if you cannot outlive your enemies, outlast them in thought. Legacy to the average man is emotional, a name, a tribute, a statue. But to the Machiavellian, legacy is tactical. It's about embedding values, frameworks, and systems that echo your intelligence, whether or not you're around to explain them. Marcus Aurelius died, but his words rule minds centuries later, not because he was poetic, but because he documented discipline, a structure of thought. Epictetus lived in bondage, but now trains generations of thinkers on how to become internally untouchable. Their power lives on because their thoughts were designed like weapons, timeless, transferable, and impossible to unsee once known. This is your task. Don't just live wisely. Leave structures behind, a journal that someone will find, a principle that someone will quote, a system that someone will adopt thinking it was theirs, but it was always yours. Because when you think clearly, you control today, but when you teach others to think clearly, you control tomorrow. And the highest form of intelligence is not what you carry, but what you leave behind in the minds of those you never met. So write like it matters, speak like it echoes, act like it seeds something. Because the final test of your intelligence is not who you were in life, but what continues moving because of how you thought. If your intelligence doesn't change your position, it's not power, it's decoration. Let's be honest. You don't need more ideas. You need sharper actions, more silence, fewer apologies, tighter decisions. Because if you've watched this far, you already know what needs to change. You know when you're lying to yourself. You know when you're playing small. You know when you're intellectualizing your own inaction and calling it wisdom. Machiavelli didn't care how much you've read. He cared about what you control. Not in theory, in practice. He understood. A man who knows but never executes isn't enlightened. He's enslaved by hesitation. So here's your final test. What will you subtract? What pattern will you shatter? What thought will you turn into movement before the day ends? You don't need motivation. You need momentum. Even if it starts as a whisper, even if it's say no where you used to nod, walk away where you used to beg, stay silent where you used to explain. This is not self-improvement. This is war with your weaker self, your outdated mind, your need to be understood. Let them wonder. Let them misunderstand.